There are so many ways to make a living as a musician these days. I always say you can either chase fame and try to be the 1% of the 1% going the record label route, or you can actually put in the work and actually make a real living being a musician. It's not easy, it takes a lot of work and time, but it's more possible than ever. And that's why I'm so excited about the guest for this episode, Tara Divina. We cover a large spectrum of topics. We get into Spotify playlisting, into branding, how to build a business, and so much more. Tara is someone who has helped hundreds of artists and musicians generate online sales. Tara has a deep understanding of what it is really takes to make it as a professional creative, right? And she really understands crowdfunding and branding and how to develop your different revenue streams. We talk about how many social media platforms should you be on, right? Should you be on all of them, or should you focus on, well, I'm not going to say a number. Should you focus on less than all of them, right? So we talk about so many different strategies and so many amazing tips. We do get into Spotify playlist listing, as I mentioned, and some strategies on reaching out to playlist curators and mostly the user generated playlist, because that's how you really get on playlists, right? That's how you stimulate the algorithm to hopefully get on the algorithmic and editorial playlists. And we cover branding and social media management, how to engage with strangers on social media and in message groups like Reddit or Facebook groups and so on. This was such a fun conversation. And Tara did a really interesting exercise with me in the beginning to help you figure out your brand that I want to challenge y'all to do on your own as well. So before we get to the episode, just a couple housekeeping things. Wherever you're listening or watching, please subscribe to the channel. I will, in the video and audio version, I will have some notes in the description, and with some links to Tara, and where you can learn more about her. Feel free to reach out. If you're watching a video, leave a comment with any questions you have. I love doing quick little custom videos to answer your questions. If you're listening on audio, go to hit me up on Instagram, right? Go to Instagram, send me a DM. Please let us know if you have any questions and how we can help, or any kind of guests you like to see, or any topics you like to see me cover, and whatnot. So thank you all so much for all the support. And then real other quick housekeeping thing, Patreon. If you like this podcast, if you like this channel, and you want to support, you can support for as little as $1 a month. It really helps us bring on amazing guests, step up the production. I need to get better internet, right? So maybe upgrade the internet connection a little bit since we started doing video. And we have many other levels as well. There's a $10 level. We have access to a giant archive of educational videos. There's a $20 level that gives you access to an even bigger archive and live workshops with me and special guests. You have the ability to have an exclusive Q&A with our podcast guests, right? I usually ask my podcast, or I started asking my podcast guests to leave 15 to 30 minutes at the end for a Q&A for any Patreon subscribers. So you'll get all of that and more over at patreon.com/Making It Academy. And if you're interested in watching the video, you can find that at makianetwork.xyz. All right, that's the housekeeping stuff. Thank y'all so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this conversation with the amazing Tara Divina. Live the life you love. All right, we are live. I am excited to introduce everyone to Tara Divina. Tara, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, tell everyone, I guess give everyone a little bit of a background about you. Like, how did you get into this crazy music business?
Oh my goodness. Well, I was just finishing up my illustrious business degree, and I realized that I didn't want to become like a brand manager for Pepsi Cola, which is kind of where things were heading. And I thought to myself, what do I actually love to do? And the answer was music. And so I just sort of emailed hundreds of record labels. It was a total shot in the dark, and I got 2 replies. One from a label called Southern Records in Chicago, and one from London Sire Records in New York City. And I wound up being their very first new media person, working on all things digital for them back when like stealing music on Napster was everyone's main concern. And that's how I got my start. They were a Warner Music Group company, and it was quite an adventure.
That's awesome. What was your, so this is something I always am curious about, right? What was your pitch like to them when you reached out to all these different labels? Like, how did you get that first opportunity? Because there's so many students that might be listening to this that might want to work for a record label. I know a lot of my college students want to work for record labels, but they don't know how to get started. Like, how do you get your foot in the door?
I found something that they were interested in but didn't know how to do, right? So for me at that time, the internet was kind of new,
Hmm.
at this point. And I was someone who could, I had some HTML skills and some knowledge of the internet, which was more than most people. And so my pitch was, let me come in and help you, with all things internet. I see you just set up your website, you just have your first email inbox set up. Why don't I come in and do this specific thing for you? And so I think by being specific and actually calling out something that you can bring to the table, it really sets you apart. And in fact, when I got my final job at Warner Music Group, I wound up circling all the way back around in my career and winding up at as a vice president at one of the Warner Music Group companies.
Oh, wow.
The way that I got that job was similar. I went in for the interview, and actually, the person who hired me, the head of the company, said he wasn't very impressed with my interview. But after the interview, I sat down and I wrote out my 90-day plan for the company. Like if they hired me tomorrow, I would come in and these are the specific things I would do
Mhm.
for them for those 90 days. And that was it. That sold them. And it's so few people are willing to be specific
Right.
in what they can provide. It's such a rare quality.
Hmm.
Or if they are specific, they're like offering to do something that's not useful. So I think
Sure.
really doing your homework and figuring out what's useful, what can you offer that's specific, what do you bring to the table, really sets you apart from all the other people that might be applying for the same position or opening.
That's great. That's great advice. What are some areas today? So when you started when the internet like first became like a really big thing. So what is the opportunity today that maybe labels are not as strong in where someone could offer some real value?
Yeah, so I mean, the internet continues to develop, right? And so we have things like NFTs, we have things like TikTok, right?
Mm.
TikTok has more of a foothold now, but it's like what, a year old in terms of its popularity. Like these are all brand new and very important areas of growth that for music with a lot of potential. And everybody's making it up as they go along. And any area where somebody's making it up as they go along is a fantastic arena for a young person to come in and really shine. Because the younger you are, the more fluid your brain is, the more flexible you are, the more you can think creatively
Mm.
about these things. Like I'm like a dinosaur now. Like I have to like my partner's 13-year-old daughter is like so much more up and hip with all the trends than I am, right? Like I'm old now. And the reality is that we need, it takes a younger mind to really
Mhm.
be able to grasp and comprehend the true potential of these new technologies.
Mhm, mhm. I love that you said NFTs. I don't know if you follow any of the stuff that I do, but I'm really into the NFT space right now. What are some? Are you into that world at all? NFTs, Web3.
I'm still wrapping my head around it. Like this is when I say I'm old, I'm joking. Obviously, I'm
Yeah.
42. I'm not really old, but I'm old in terms of it takes me longer now to wrap my brain around these new concepts. And I understand what NFTs are and how they work, but I'm still trying to really digest how they can, be worked with
Mhm,
as a musician.
mhm. Got it. Okay. So me going to your bio, like what is a heart healing medicine musician? What does that mean?
That's such a great question. So, I used to be a musician that wrote a lot of songs about not being a musician and not writing any music. That was kind of my main topic. Very angsty, very frustrated, creative. And then I started getting into personal development and healing work and all sorts of healing modalities. And a lot of them used music as the primary way of accompanying, enhancing, or delivering the healing. And after some time, after I learned to connect more deeply with my own feelings and my own sensibilities, I started writing music again, except this time it was music designed for those environments. And
Hmm.
so I found my niche there in terms of music that is intended to help us through a really hard time, or music that's intended to inspire us in a particular way or open our hearts. And so oftentimes these are shamanic healing settings, meditation circles, retreats, things like that.
That's awesome. That's so important for our industry because feel like we work and we grind so much all the time, and we don't deal with the mental health. And I've had periods when I was really in the grind where I've had anxiety attacks, and I literally think I was dying because I never had an anxiety attack before. So that's so great that you do that, and it's so important for people to learn to unplug. Maybe we'll dive into that a little later. I'll put a pin on that. But you work with musicians too, right? Like you help independent musicians make a living doing music. Tell me a little bit more
Yes.
about that.
Yeah, so I focus mostly on entrepreneurs who are looking to also be musicians, right? Versus musicians who are looking to be profitable as musicians, because I believe that nowadays it's really important to have multiple income streams
Yeah.
and multiple things that we can monetize. And so it's very hard to make a full-time living just doing music. And usually the people that are making a really good living who aren't, super famous, they have something else going on. Like they have
Mhm.
like a candle brand, or they're like coaching musicians on how to do Spotify playlisting, or they have some sort of other hustle that they're doing that relates to their career, that monetizes the same skills that they use across the board, but isn't just the music. And so I mentor people on how to integrate their artistry into their existing brand, into their existing company, so that if, maybe they think like they don't have the space to be creative and fully self-expressed in their business, and they're feeling that like, oh, but my passion is music. I help bring those two things together so it doesn't feel like there's this one thing you really want to be doing but you're stuck doing the other.
Mhm. At what stage do you work with musicians? Like, where are they at usually in their careers before they come to you?
It depends. So sometimes I work with highly established entrepreneurs. Maybe they're making millions of dollars a year,
Mhm.
but they never released a song. Or in fact, maybe they can't even find the courage to sing a song in public, right?
Okay.
So they could be that early on in their career. And sometimes I work with musicians who have other businesses who've been going at it for a decade and haven't
Mhm.
made any progress. So it just really depends if there's resonance with
Mhm.
my style and approach of how to set yourself apart from the crowd.
Okay. And then where does that conversation usually start? Because you talked about branding. So when you work with someone new, do you usually start on the branding side first? And what does that look like?
Yeah, so my take on it is that the most important thing to uncover is your core message.
Mhm.
And that's really my definition of core message is it's what you stand for. It's what people recognize you for. It's the message that you can't help but communicate everything that you say. And it's the golden thread that connects all the different things you do. And oftentimes for musicians, I'll say, let's just look at your song titles, look at your lyrics. I mean, we'll be able to pretty much figure out what your core message is because it's usually like hidden in plain sight. But I also have very specific exercises that I take people through, thought experiments, experiences. I also ask very specific questions to start to get to the heart of their core message. So
Mhm.
if you're interested, I could give you a taste of that and demonstrate.
Yeah, let's do it. That'd be awesome.
Okay, great. So this is a rather morbid but very effective thought experiment, so I
Okay,
apologize.
it's
Little
all good.
warning on that one. Okay, so thought experiment. Okay, so I have some really bad news for you,
Okay.
which is that you thought we were going to be doing this show, but actually, this is the last 5 minutes of your life. This is it. This is your last 5 minutes on planet Earth. It's very bad news. And the silver lining is that, as you know, we are recording right now, and I have arranged for the answer to the question I'm about to ask you to be broadcast to every single human being on the planet. So every single person is going to hear this translated into their language. They'll all be able to receive it. So the only rule is that you only have 5 seconds to think about your answer, and the answer must be like just a few seconds long.
Okay.
So I'm about to ask you the question, um, and I suggest if you're listening along with this, see if you can come up with your answer to this question too. So are you ready?
I think so.
Okay. What is your final instruction to all the inhabitants of planet Earth on how to live life?
Ooh, it's a good one. I only have 5 seconds.
Blurt it.
Every individual is unique and different. And if we respect individuals first, we can be greater, and with love and compassion, we can be greater as a collective. But it all starts with the individual. Something like that. I don't know.
Beautiful. I love that. Okay, we're going to close the thought experiment. You're going to live a long, healthy, and happy life.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
So I love that. So your answer to that question was about us all having our own unique individuality and the need to respect that individuality to benefit the collective.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, if you reflect on that, why do you think that was the one thing you'd want everyone to know?
So not to get too deep into politics, but I'm very libertarian, and I first believe in like individualism and doing things voluntary, and not being forced into doing things. And each individual is unique. Each individual is different, and if we provide opportunities for that individual to succeed, we can be better as a society, as a culture, as people. And that's why I started the academy. One of the things, and I know there's a couple of people from the academy listening, but one of the goals I have, which I haven't even announced yet, I want to make the academy an actual school that's focused on the individual and entrepreneurship, right? Every person has a different learning style. Like, not every child can go into a public school and be successful because they might learn differently. They might be into different things. So we have to provide opportunities for each individual to succeed first, because if individuals are succeeding, it can benefit the collective. And, it's just a saying that I heard this week is, if we can figure out how to make the lower class and lower middle class richer, we can all become better. And that's how we lift people up out of poverty.
That's so beautiful. And so I love that because you've actually immediately related the message to your project that you're working on, and how you want to modify the school, and then how you see that pouring out into the collective. And that's really the thing about core message. And I'm sure that is your core message, right?
For sure.
Sometimes we go through there's other questions that I ask as well, but that one really is like the beginning. And if you can give a specific answer to that one, generally that is the golden thread, that you'll find that you see the message in everything that you do, and it's really, you can't help but spout it because it's what you're really standing for. And that's what sets you apart. It's like people who resonate with that, they're going to want to learn from you and not someone else.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. That's how you pretty much begin when you work with an artist. You kind of work on that, figure out what the golden thread is.
First step, because the reality is, it doesn't matter how good our music is, unfortunately. Like, we can come up with the greatest masterpiece, but if we don't stand for something, it's not going to stick. People aren't going to recognize us. It's not like you can build a career on a radio hit anymore.
Right. Yeah. It's about authenticity. And I always talk about, like, people, I mean, I know it's weird to look at like a musician or a person as a brand, but we are brands, right? Especially if we're putting ourselves out there publicly, it is a brand. And I always talk about branding as being the behaviors that you consistently do. So the joke I always say in class, if your goal is to be the next Mother Teresa, where you're constantly getting into the bar fights, you're going to be the idiot that gets in the bar fight. It's not the next Mother Teresa.
So true.
So it's your consistent behaviors, and it's like what you consistently put out there on social media. That's what develops your brand.
Totally. And we think like, oh, I said this once, that's enough. It's not true. It's like people need to hear us saying the same thing in different ways, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times before it really sinks in and before it's resonant. But it's also more fun to follow someone that stands for something, even if it's not something we agree with.
Yeah, because people want to connect to something that's real, right? They want to feel some kind of emotional connection with that now, especially more than ever with social media. It's really hard for an artist these days to be like the next Daft Punk, where you can just be completely mysterious and completely unplugged from the world and just show up every 4 or 5 years and release something. Like, that's gonna be really, really hard to recreate. So these days you have to be a real person that people can connect with. I believe that. What are your thoughts on that?
I think to a degree, it's like you have the Banksies of the world, right?
Sure.
Like where like the anonymity is the core message. Like if that is your message in some level, you might be able to get away with it. But generally speaking, they're still standing for something.
Yeah,
That's
for
the
sure.
thing. Yeah.
And I had a thought and I lost it. But besides the person behind the brand, um, I completely lost it. So where I usually start, it's interesting where you start with this whole exercise. And what I usually start with is the topic wheel. Have you heard of the topic wheel before?
Mm-mm.
No. So it's kind of like, you know, how we did probably in elementary school or middle school, where you draw a bubble and it starts something, main topics in the middle, and then you create bubbles that come out of that bubble, right? And the bubbles from those bubbles and so on. So the topic wheel is an exercise I do where it's the artist in the middle, and then we think about, okay, what are 5 to 6 things that make them uniquely them? And
Mm.
so let's say it is music and it's health, it's homesteading, whatever it is, and then what is it about those things that make you unique and stand out? And that's kind of a way to help start developing. Okay, what is the brand? Because it's like the real person behind the music.
That's great. I love that method and that approach of getting at it. I mean, there's so many different ways to get to it. At the end of the day, you'll know you've found your core message because
Mm-hmm.
you're just really excited to talk about it and you can't shut
Absolutely.
up about it.
Yeah, for sure. And then once you start working and developing the brand, like how do you figure out how to like monetize the music? I mean, that's what most musicians like want to talk about, right? How do I actually make money doing this versus just
Hmm.
it being a hobby?
The first thing I ask them is, how do you like to spend your time?
Mm-hmm.
Because there are some people whose idea of fun is touring constantly, right? And so there's a way to make money from that, of course. There's some people whose idea of fun is being in the studio and recording and being very prolific and like constantly releasing music. There's some people who like can't get enough of making merch. There's some people who want to play online, love being on the internet, love being on social media. There's some people who can't stand it. Some people love TikTok.
Right.
So I try to figure out what's the intersection of what
Mm-hmm.
this person wants to be doing and does already. How do they have fun? How do they like to spend their time? And then how do we make money from that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like it goes back again being authentically you. Like how do you communicate best online, or is it
Yeah.
not online? Is it in person? They're doing live shows.
Yeah. And everybody has the very strong preferences. Like nobody's like, I don't care, any of it's fine. Like people are very particular. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's all about finding the thing, but realistically, you can make money doing anything. Like you give me anything and I promise there is a way to make money doing that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And most of us we resign ourselves to thinking, oh, I couldn't get paid to do that. But you can get paid to do literally anything.
Yeah, especially these days, and with the internet, there's so many opportunities. Um, do you, so what are your thoughts on? So I feel like, so I'm a big fan of like Gary Vee, but I do think he does give one piece of advice that I don't completely agree with, and that's the whole like posting content constantly, like 1,000 pieces of content on every single platform, everywhere, all day. And yeah, sure, it gives you more distribution and everything, but I feel like you should really just master one or two.
Yes, I'm so with you on that. I always recommend people choose the platform they use.
Mhm.
Easy, right? Because if I like hate Pinterest, why would I use Pinterest to try to promote things? It doesn't make any
Right.
sense. I don't understand the platform. I don't vibe with it. I don't get it on some level. But if I'm on TikTok all night, every night, like, of course, there's some part of me that probably wants to be engaged and
Yeah.
involved in that.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's why I do YouTube stuff, because I'm on YouTube all the time, searching artists or silly videos or whatnot. And
Yeah.
then how what are your thoughts on, because I know you work with a lot of entrepreneurs as well, and of course, like the goal is to monetize your business to make money. What are your thoughts on how much time to spend on writing music versus how much time to spend on creating content that's not necessarily music, whether it's content for TikTok or content for YouTube, wherever the artist is?
My answer to that is however much time you want to write music. So, like, let's say you're someone who wants to write music 12 hours a day. Like, that's
Mhm.
all you would like to do that all the time. I'm actually not that person. It just comes or it doesn't. You document yourself writing music. Those are your posts. What lyrics did you write today? What clip of yourself could you post as a video? What was your experience writing music today? Like, can you just document what you're already doing? Like, I think we tend to make things so complicated. We're like, oh, I've got to produce all this content, which means I have to make extra time in my day. No, like if we're smart, we document what's already happening, and that is the content. It's
Yeah,
effortless
for sure. Document the
and more
journey.
interesting.
Way more interesting, yeah. And then, okay, so you figure out what your platform is, you figure out what kind of content you want to put out there. What are your thoughts on? Again, it's average person, right? Not the Banksys and Daft Punks of the world, but what what is a good frequency? Like, how often should people put content out? To In the most ideal scenario, of course, we want to
Mhm.
give, because especially since I already talked about individualism and freedom, and going with your own flow, and everyone's different.
Yeah,
But is there an ideal way to at least maintain the attention of an
yeah.
audience?
So if you have the energy, put content out multiple times a day. If that's in your flow, if you enjoy it, go for it. You can't, I would say this, you can't put out too much content. That's not a thing. If you find you have to kind of press yourself and you want to do the minimum amount of stuff, I think 3 times a week is a really good cadence, like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, like something in the middle of the week, when people are, just to keep yourself alive, in people's consciousness. Now, it's a little different if you have something that's highly produced, like a podcast or a show or something. At that point, once a week is fine, of course. But for small things like stories and posts and little bits of content, I think a few times a week at minimum is a really good idea.
Now, what about if someone does do like a podcast or YouTube show that is longer, like half hour, it's more produced? Do you think they should maybe take like micro content from that bigger piece of content, or maybe even like
Yes.
create other things around it to support the big piece of content?
Yeah, 100%, right? Repurposing content is the name of the game. If you make one piece of content that is well produced, you want to use it in a million different ways. So you can transcribe that thing and use the text
Yep.
as posts. You can make graphics out of it, like memes, carousels. You can make stories out of it. You can make boomerangs out of it. You can do backstage shots of it, clips of it, etc. I am so about that. And then you can repurpose it across multiple platforms. You definitely, it's so tempting to think we need to redo everything from scratch, and it's not true.
Yeah, completely agree. Now, all right, so we have the content figured out, and how do we promote it? Like, how do we get people to actually see it? Like, what are your favorite like marketing strategies?
Hmm.
And consistent content is a marketing strategy, right? But
Yeah,
besides
so I
that,
mean, you put out valuable content over time, believe it or not, even if you think people aren't going to find you, they will. I've had clients come to me because I commented on somebody's post. Like
yeah,
it's amazing how people can, there is a magic to it that is ineffable, right?
mhm,
But I would say things that you can actually do to promote it. Post content in groups where there's people that may not normally see you. Find platforms that are trying to gain popularity and that will out kind of promote your stuff in a way that they normally wouldn't. So I'm talking about like when Instagram first started promoting Reels or TikToks first started getting popular. These platforms would, if you were an early adopter of the content creation, they would push your stuff out to millions of people. So
mhm,
that's another thing, is be an early adopter on a platform, join different groups like Facebook groups or Reddit groups or places where you can be a presence and offer real value.
mhm,
You can definitely try to collaborate with other people, show up on, be a guest on people's podcasts, be a
yeah,
guest on as an interviewer, um, you know, have content on your website that can be picked up by SEO, like
mhm,
put your posts on there, I mean, and have that be searchable. Um, Definitely have something free that you offer people so that they're incentivized to give you an email address. You can start to cultivate that. Like there's so many different ways to get out there. And I would say find the most high leverage thing you can do, the thing that's going to have the biggest result, and do
mhm,
that. So, just as an example, if you want to get your music out there right now, your best bet is to be on a really good Spotify playlist,
mhm,
right? Like
sure.
that's just the highest leverage activity. So reach out to playlists and get some, and be persistent until you get that break of being featured somewhere. Basically, either find another platform that's going to feature your content and push it out to new people, or create your own platform.
Yeah.
And What I mean by this is like my favorite example is Sarah McLachlan.
Mhm.
So she was like an unknown Canadian singer-songwriter back in the mid 90s. And by the way, I was her doppelganger. People used to come up to me on the street and ask me for her autograph. Um,
That's great.
and she was unknown, barely making it as a Canadian artist, right? And she had the idea to start this cool little festival called Lilith Fair, right?
Yep.
And so Lilith Fair, for those of you that are not a million years old, was a
Hey, I'm not a
festival
million.
for a festival. It was the first all women's music festival, right? Genius idea.
Mhm.
Everyone said it wouldn't work, but she put herself on stage um, as a headliner next to all the biggest artists of that time.
Mhm.
And so she immediately went from like unknown to associated with all the biggest names and very well known. And so it's like that. If we can see an opportunity, either online or in person, to create a platform for ourselves and feature ourselves next to other artists, maybe it's an online event, an online summit, some sort of different type of concert. Maybe your genre doesn't have a concert or a
Mhm.
festival. Like it's about if you are the creator of that platform, suddenly you have the opportunity to position yourself in incredible ways, which again will lead people to your content and have what you're putting out there get seen.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you familiar with the book 22 Immutable Laws of Branding?
Mm-mm, I don't know
No?
that one.
That's one of the things they talk about is becoming a leader in a category, right? So she created this all women's music festival. I think it was a touring festival too. And it was a brand new category. It was like something that didn't exist. And then even to this day, like there's not as many all women's festivals that I can think of, not
Yeah.
that are consistent like that. So she was really a pioneer in what she did.
Yeah, any women who are listening, there's still a lot of space, especially
Oh yeah.
like if you're an electronic artist of any kind, dance music, like an equivalent is just waiting to happen. There's so much room to do new stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Just got to be creative and figure out how to just be different and stand out. I want to go back. So there's so many things that you said that we can unpack. So I want to go back to the groups. You've said Facebook groups. Where else are there groups that people can engage with? Like, do you use Reddit or things like that? And then the more important question I have is, what's the best way to add value? So you talk about adding value to groups, right? So I think the worst people in groups are the ones that only self promote. So like, how do you
Totally.
actually join a group and
Yeah.
add value to it?
Yeah, so one of my favorite mentors has a great saying that encapsulates this. She says, "You want your content to be for me, for you, and for us." And what that means is basically it's got to be something that I get value from, you get value from, and we get value as the collective. So if I'm just out there and I'm like, "Hey, listen to my music, it's awesome." It's just about me. And if I'm
Yeah.
about, hey, you should listen to my music, you need this, it's kind of just about you, right? Like, what do I, like, there's no me in that.
Yeah.
But if I'm like, hey, I wrote this song and it's about the plight of the struggling musician who can't seem to get their music heard anywhere and how to solve that problem. And I'm really excited to share it with you. And I don't know if it's any good. And, check it out and let me know what you think. Maybe it'll be helpful for you. It's a little more valuable, right? Like
Mhm.
now so I find participating in those groups, it's really, if it passes the for me, for you, for us test, it's going to be much more likely to do well. And I also
Mhm.
find that if you can speak to kind of the biggest concern people have and then give them some encouragement so that they can
Mhm.
see proof that they're going to be able to succeed through you, that's also really, really important. So maybe you want to celebrate something that you've achieved as an artist, but you want to do it in a way that shows people that they can do it too, right?
Right.
I did it. And so I want to let you know that you can do this too. It's totally possible. This thing you've been worried about that you think isn't possible, you can do it. I am just like you. There's no difference between you and me. You are capable. Then people are inspired, they're touched, they're moved, and they're going to respond.
Yeah.
They're going to want more.
Yeah. People love seeing someone that's in their world that is successful and then like wants to share that success with others. It's so weird because like I don't know if it's just certain genres, but I've worked with a lot of locals, and sometimes that space is so competitive where it's like, oh, my set was better than the other artists on the show. It's like your set was different, and it's subjective, right? Music's subjective. Like some people think the Beatles are the greatest thing ever, and people like me think they're kind of overrated. Like, yeah, hate me for it, but like, so it's subjective. So, and also there's so many different ways to make a living as a musician, and you don't need a lot of fans these days. Like, you don't need millions of fans. You can literally on Twitch make $50,000 a year if you have 200 engaged followers on Twitch. That's almost nothing. So why not build other people up? Because you're not really competing for anything. And the more you work on building up other musicians, maybe they'll help build you back up as well, and how you create a community.
100%.
I love that. And then, okay, so besides the groups, you also talked about email. How do you get someone on your email list?
You got to offer them something really interesting and of value to them. So, for example, if you go to my website, taradivina.com, I just finally got my free course up. It's called Create and Flow. And it's a 5-day course on how to, unleash your creativity, get into your creative flow, and monetize it, right? So people want to sign up for that. I've had hundreds of people already kind of put in their email address to get that. And that's just an example. It's like, what do you have to offer that you could happily give away for free that's really high value? Not something that's like a trick to get someone to sign up for your email list or, like the least you could possibly give away, but like something of real value, something really interesting. And if you offer that, people would love to sign up for your email list, and then you could let them know about what else you have to offer.
And how do you figure out what to offer? So I call this the opt-in offer. I'm sure you've heard that term, or the freebie or the giveaway, whatever. How do you figure out, like, how do you tie the brand? So we talked about figuring out the brand at first. Do you tie that into the offer at all? Or how do you figure out what that offer is?
Definitely. It should be an expression of your core message. So generally what I do is when I have a client and we're thinking about all their offerings, it's like, okay, what are you going to sell? What are you going to give away for free? We look at all the different tiers, like we look at what it is that somebody coming into their world would want to experience first, So let's say, an example would be someone that teaches music, right? Someone that maybe they're a vocal coach as well as a professional musician. So maybe there's like an hour-long class of them giving away their favorite, most valuable, juicy tidbits on vocal coaching that they could give away as their freebie. But that leads into a 6-week course on how to improve the vocals on your recordings, right? Which leads into a one-on-one mentorship. So it should be a logical sequence that leads people through your funnel and through your process so that they want more, so that they're really fed and nourished, like you've given them something of real value where they're like, oh, that was incredible, I have to have more. Not like, oh, she gave me half of it and now I need the other half, I have to pay for it.
and that ties into like having like other revenue streams, whether it's not just music. So that's kind of where that comes in. So how do you answer the question when an artist tells you, I just want to do music, I don't want to do a course, I don't want to do the other stuff? Do you try to convince them that they do need other revenue streams if they want to make music full time? Or like, what is your advice to a person that doesn't seem very open in the beginning to the idea of just having a course or something?
Depends what their financial needs are, right? Because the reality is like people are full-time musicians waiting tables, right? So like you're gonna have to pay your rent somehow, and music streaming services don't pay that much, right? And so then like you're not going to make the money off of your actual music until you get really big. And that's going to take some time. So the reality is you got to get creative. If you want to make money just doing music or being involved in music, you have to offer something of value to people other than your actual music. So what I might say is you could do custom songs for people's wedding.
Yeah.
You could do, scores for shows. You could do custom songs for someone's podcast intro, right? Like there's ways of, you're a musician who's making money that's not a teacher that are possible to monetize. It's just it's going to be something other than your streams of your recordings are making you money initially, just because it just takes time.
Yeah. And the key thing you said initially, right? Because it takes time. And I think, and nothing against anyone that's working at a restaurant, but if your goal is to make a living being a musician, like again, if you encompass the entire brand, if let's say you are doing custom songs for weddings at first, and or you're doing vocal coaching or guitar lessons, people are now, if and especially if you do it well and you're genuine with it, people are going to become fans of you. And if they're fans of you, they're going to support your music. And there's this really cool quote I've heard from CD Baby on one of their podcasts. It's music is the last thing that matters until people hear it, and then it's the only thing that matters. So it's like you got to lead people to the music. And if you, and I also always talk about like when you focus on one or two things. So it's like your music, and then the one other thing that helps you make money. If you really dive in deep on just those one or two and laser focus, like you can become a Jay-Z or whatever, a super entrepreneur down the road. But when he started, all he did was music. That was all in. And he had a side hustle. There was a little illegal side hustle that brought him money in. But that's all he did, right? He sold drugs and he made music. And two things he was hyper focused on. And that the income stream funded his music. And then he became a full-time musician. And then he started these other businesses because he was able to hire a team. So don't go out thinking you have to start 5-10 different businesses, because you won't be able to do it right.
Unless you enjoy that, because I have 5 businesses and it's kind of the most fun thing ever, but I'm weird.
Well, you probably have, maybe I don't know, but do you have people that work with you or virtual assistants or anything?
I do, yeah, of course, yeah.
So you have the ability to get a team. So
You've got to have a team.
And they'll take away all those small little like tasks and the minutia of posting on social media or editing content and things like that.
Yeah, and I would say actually hire a team before you think you're ready or before you think you can afford it will allow you to scale faster. And so I highly recommend it. Even if you think like who am I to be paying someone else to help me? It will help. You will feel so supported. Even if you're paying someone just a couple hours a month, or you've got someone on Fiverr who, like it will just be like the wind beneath your wings, and you'll find you're able to do so much more to promote yourself.
Yeah. What was the first thing that you outsourced?
The first thing that I outsourced, one of my businesses, I got a virtual assistant to take over pretty much everything that I did. All the back end, all the scheduling, all the client relations, all the customer service, all the, everything basically that I did on the computer, they took over.
That's awesome. And what would you suggest for a musician? Like, what should be the first thing they outsource?
I would suggest, again, so you want to look at the highest leverage activities, the things that are going to make you the most money. So I would say outsource, have someone go and research playlists that you could submit yourself to, because it's tedious. It takes a long time to do it right. And, they have to track the person down on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. But if you have someone do that for you, they can even provide you with a spreadsheet of people to reach out to. It will save you hours and hours and hours. And again, one hit on a really good Spotify playlist could change your whole Spotify profile. Like you could go from 0 to 10,000 monthly listeners. It can make a huge difference in perception and also just exposure.
For sure. I'm trying not to talk about a Spotify playlist, but before I get there, so you said also like hire or outsource something before you think you're ready. Like, how do you know when you're at that point? Like, how do you know? Because like it's scary, right? Because you're like, okay, I have a little bit of money coming in, but if I hire someone, then I don't have any money. I can't pay for this, can't pay for that. Like, it's scary. So like, at what point? I guess, I don't know, how do you figure out where you are financially if you can actually hire someone?
If you've hit a wall where if you work anymore, you're just burnt out, right? So like you either don't have any more time or you're burnt out. So an example would be like maybe you have kids, right? And you have kids, there's only so much time you have to focus on this stuff, right? Because maybe there's a 3-year-old pulling at your pant leg or something. Yeah. So you're going to burn out fast. You're not going to be able to spend 10 hours a day poring over Spotify playlists. It's just not a thing, right? You're only going to have a little bit of time, and probably you want to use that time creatively. So if you are no longer able to be creative as much as you want to be because you don't have enough time, and you're spending that time doing stuff that could be outsourced, that's when it's time to hire help. And sometimes that might look like hiring someone to clean your house or do your dishes
Mhm.
or cook for you, right? Like you can outsource anything so that you have more time, you know. But if you are noticing you're hitting some sort of a limit or an edge, whether it's just the limit of how much you can work without feeling like a crazy person, or whether it's a legitimate limit, like you can't balance all these different things, hire up. You
Yeah.
expand your capacity to receive more. Whenever we expand our capacity to receive more, we receive more. And you'll probably find that every time you increase your expenses a little bit like that in your business, your income increases. It's
Mhm.
like, I feel like it's a little bit, again, it's a little bit magical, but whenever our need for money increases, the money we receive tends to kind of increase a little bit with it
Mhm.
in most cases.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so one important piece with that too is like self-awareness, right? And knowing when you're at that limit. And some people may not know when they're at that limit. So I guess what are your, because we talked a little bit about like mental health, like what are your thoughts on mental health, and maybe instead of, if someone's not self-aware, like maybe they just create time for downtime. Like what are your thoughts on that, like creating just space, and like how should someone go about that?
Yeah, so one thing about being a creative is you need some space.
Yeah.
Even if you don't have 6 weeks to go sit in a cabin in the woods to like make your next masterpiece, like
Dream.
maybe 30 minutes a day even like can make a huge difference. And if you can't get that, there's two problems. One is you won't have time to create, but two is you're creative. This is what brings
Yeah.
you joy. And suddenly you don't have time to do the thing you actually want to do that you're like living for. That's when it's time.
For
Right?
sure.
That's when it's time to outsource if you cannot find the time to do the thing that you love the most.
Hmm. Absolutely, yeah. And with the creating space and the mental health side, right? I think people that take that time are actually more productive and more creative than the people that just work all the time and think they just have to work and they have to do this. It's gonna get done, and the more time you make for just downtime, you're actually will be more productive during your work time. I guess this really cool method. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's called the Pomodoro Method, where you're 50 minutes on, 10 minutes off, 50 minutes on, 10 minutes off, and it's like sounds like you're taking a lot of breaks during the day, like those 10-minute breaks, but the people that do that, and it's like active break, right? It's not like go play on Facebook for 10 minutes. Like, no, put away all technology in your screens, go for a walk, do some jumping jacks, swing a kettlebell, or just walking up and down some stairs, or just go outside and get some fresh air. But people that do that, they can usually get an 8-hour day, like days worth of work done in like 3 or 4 hours, because they're just so much more productive.
Absolutely. Like I can't tell you how many times I've slowed people down to speed up, right? And
Mhm.
how many times I've had to slow down to speed up where it's like, oh, I think I'm being so productive by working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. But it's not true. You know,
Yeah.
like what am I actually working on? Just a lot of times we're working on the wrong things, or like we just want to feel like we're doing something.
Hmm. Absolutely, yeah. Going back to the Spotify thing, you talked about a lot about reaching out to playlist curators and everything. What type of playlists do you focus on? Because I know there's different categories, like the editorial playlist, the AI generated playlist, and so on. Which playlist would you recommend to focus on?
Well, you can't really control your how you get on the AI playlist
Right,
directly.
that
There's
they
just
can, yeah,
indirect things you could do.
right.
There's some indirect things, but not directly. And then Spotify editorial playlist, I mean, it's limited. You put your release out and you have 6 weeks and you fill out one box and that's all you get to fill out. And then you
Mhm.
hit submit and that's the end of it, right? Unless you know people at Spotify,
Right.
right? Maybe you know someone.
We have a lot of money. You
What's
do the pay,
that?
or you have money and you do the payola thing.
Yeah, right. I don't know. I don't know what's going on in the payola Spotify world, but the Spotify algorithm loves when people add you to their playlist, even if it's just like a small playlist.
Mhm.
So it's actually worth it to go out there and find playlists that feature artists whose audience you would like to listen to your music. So make a list of 25 artists who you think their fans would love you if they just heard your music, right? And then you go on your desktop and you open the Spotify app on your desktop, not your phone. You open up that artist's page and you scroll down to Discovered On and then click See More. And you're going to see the kind of like the all-time playlists that have promoted, like have featured that artist. And pick people who aren't massive, right? Like don't pick like the biggest artist in town. Like pick someone who is a bit more high profile than you or same level, like not somebody with bazillions of listeners. And then you track down the curator of that playlist, which is a whole adventure in of itself, and write them something heartfelt, and or curate your own playlist in the genre and trade. People love that.
Mm-hmm. It's great ideas, really, really is. And I love that you. There's a few things I love there. So I do an exercise I call the artist ID, and that is basically come with a list of artists in different categories that are similar to you as an artist. And yeah, like the small playlists, like the playlist curators, like doesn't matter if they have 10 followers or 20 followers, like just get on playlists and I always say like get your reps in with the people that don't have a lot of followers, and then once you get to the individual or user generated playlists that have a couple hundred or a couple thousand, like slowly work your way up, because now you know what your pitch is that works, and then if it works with the one that has 100, then cool. If it doesn't work right away, maybe fine tune it, and then you go to the one that has 500, and you go to the one that has 1,000. Kind of just slowly like work your way up. I don't know what are your thoughts on that strategy, or to use something similar?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of just go for it myself.
Just go for it.
But you know what? I think that's a really good point. Like in general, if you don't know what works, to start with the like things that aren't as risky, or like things that are you don't easier to lose. So I like that strategy for sure. Generally speaking, I think you want to focus most of your time on playlists that have some reach. Like if you have limited time, I like to look at playlists with at least like 500 people following them. But again, the algorithm, though, you're better off getting added to 1,000 playlists with one follower than one playlist with 1,000 followers. So that's actually going to tip the algorithm off to start putting you in the AI playlists.
So, I mean, can you? I don't know if this works, but could you also kind of hack the system a little bit and I don't know, find a bunch of your friends to add you to their personal playlist?
Yeah, if it's friends, that's fine. If it's bots in a foreign country, bad.
No, absolutely not. Yeah.
But yeah, if you just have your friends add you, of course, if you could find 1,000 actual friends and it's not just some playlist scam, it will help. It'll help. But I mean, the idea is that, if an organic and diverse group of people are adding you to their playlist, it's a sign that people like the song, right?
For sure, yeah.
And if your friends add you to their playlist, but they don't listen to your song, it doesn't count the same way.
True. Makes a lot of sense.
They're not listening to the playlist, it won't register as valuable.
So I have a rant that I've probably done several times on the podcast about the bots. But before I do my rant, why do you say you shouldn't use the bots?
Spotify will kick you off. They have really strong policies on that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a good one, right? And another thing I always say too, that, I mean, there is ways you can. There's these scam websites where you go pay $100 and you get a couple thousand streams, right? What I always say with that too, if you get lucky and you don't get kicked off, after you run a campaign, and please don't run a campaign like that, and don't find out what happens. But if you do, and you go to similar artists, and you're an R&B artist, and now the similar artist is a metal band and a emo band and an EDM artist, you completely destroy your data and your algorithm by buying fake streams. So don't do it. So a long time ago, before I first started a podcast, I heard someone talk about how book publishers will like buy a bunch of books just to get someone on the New York Times bestseller list. And I was like, okay, well, if they do it, I should boost my downloads on the podcast so I can be ranked on iTunes. So I did that. I was ranked on iTunes. Back then, up until I did this 5 years ago, up until about 3 months ago, my similar podcast had nothing to do with music, and it took a really, really long time to actually be paired up with actual similar podcasts. So don't do it. Don't buy fake streams.
Yeah. In general, on any platform. I mean, people do it too. Like on Instagram, they'll buy 100,000 followers, but then like their comments are all spam bots, or like those people don't really engage. Like eventually you're going to get found out. It won't be useful.
Yeah. And people in the industry are smart. They know what to look for. I mean, as a promoter, I know what to look for. And it's not just the followers. I look at the comments and how genuine are the comments and so on. Um,
Yeah.
is there? So I know we have a few minutes left, but is there anything that we didn't touch on that you feel like would give the audience some additional value based on either anything we talked about or maybe something we didn't cover?
I'm also really a big fan of crowdfunding
Hmm.
for musicians. Like myself, I've crowdfunded a couple of albums, and it's not like I have a huge fan base, but I find there are ways of doing it that can really help, that can really benefit everyone. And a lot of people think, oh, it's dead, nobody's doing that anymore. It's totally not true. Like if you can get people to donate amazing perks and get incredible things that people can have in exchange for their donations to your project. It can be really beneficial for you, for the people donating, for the people purchasing. It can be a win-win-win. And it's still possible to raise 5, 10, 15, 20K for your album, right? And so it's a really nice way to monetize your music.
Hmm.
That's a little bit indirect, but it's, since we don't really have album sales so much anymore, not as much, it's a wonderful substitute for that. It can really offset your production costs.
Hmm. We'll probably do an entire episode just on crowdfunding, but I'm going to throw in a couple of questions. So, what platform do you like these days? Because I know for a while, Pledge Music was a thing, but unfortunately, that one didn't work out. But what is your favorite place to crowdfund?
Yeah. Well, they have high fees, but Indiegogo, honestly, is the most easy platform to manage a wide array of perks. That's where they really shine.
Hmm.
And my like perks, to me, that is the strategy for a successful crowdfunding campaign is just have such an epic array of perks that people can't say no. And so Indiegogo is the best way to do that and not go crazy trying to manage or track everything. You'll wind up giving up like 5% plus your merchant fees, maybe 8% of the money, but it's still
Hmm.
worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, do you have any advice on, like, I guess, how many perks you should offer? Like, is there such thing as like not enough and too many?
Mhm. I mean, if you have 100 perks, that's too many.
Yeah.
If you have 5 perks, that's too few, in my opinion. I think somewhere between like 10 and 20 is probably a
Okay.
nice sweet spot. And really good stuff. I recommend like if you buy anything from like a local artisan or somebody that's like a small shop or whatever that you love, that you like really endorse, like reach out to them and see if they would like to donate because you can offer all sorts of promotion in exchange. You can offer to promote them on your socials, on your email list,
Hmm.
wherever, in exchange for the donation. So everybody wins. And usually they're so excited. And if it's something you love, they're so happy to have you go online and say, I love this thing. It gives you an excuse to post about your campaign. You're actually highlighting them
Hmm.
instead of saying, look at me.
Right.
Um, so those are my recommendations. It can work really well. I just had one, I just ran a successful one last month or 2 months ago.
Yeah. What was the campaign? How much did you raise?
I raised 10,000 on the campaign and then 5,000 on the side.
Awesome.
Some people will choose to donate directly to you. They'll just say, give me your email. I'm going to send it to you. So
That's awesome. And this was for an album, a new album that you
for my
came out?
album, I've been releasing track by track.
Awesome. So you're releasing singles monthly or how often?
Pretty much every few weeks, there's been one coming out. It's a little erratic because I'm releasing them as they're completed.
Okay.
So there's a little bit of an unpredictable cadence.
Nice. I love it. And how have those releases been going? Like how often do you? I mean, how many have you released so far, and how many more do you plan on releasing?
I released 3, and there's going to be 10.
Okay.
It's going well. I haven't devoted my full energy to this because I've been so knee deep in launching some of my other business products.
Hmm.
So I just filled my creative business coaching mastermind. I have tons of new one-on-one clients and courses that I run, and so I've been knee deep in that. But it's been going well. I've gotten tons of new people listening to the music, touched a lot of hearts, gotten a lot of amazing feedback.
That's so cool. That's really cool. I love seeing artists that are successful. They're able to raise that kind of money for their music and everything. How much does so going back to the beginning, tying it all together, the branding stuff, how much does that tie into deciding what the different levels and different perks are for your crowdfunding campaign? Or does that tie in at all?
That's a great question. I haven't, You could definitely tie it in. I mean, it could be a thematic, but I would say any product that you love could be tied into your core message,
Mhm,
meaning that you could describe the perk in the way that that invokes your core message for sure.
mhm,
So it's not totally necessary. I just say like if there's like a cool oil that you love, like you could put that on there. It doesn't necessarily have to be directly related to your message or music.
mhm,
But I'm sure as you describe why you love the thing, your message is going to come through.
mhm. Sure. What was the best selling perk on your kick, what's the Kickstarter on your crowdfunding campaign?
Um, so dear friend of mine, um, gosh, why am I blanking? Oh, thank God, I remembered the name of her company. I was about to space it. She donated so much of her products. Her name
Oh,
is, her company's name is Clarea, Clareia, and she makes these incredible botanical creations, like these absolutely just mind-blowing, like oils and sprays and products. And she donated 20 items to my campaign, and they just sold like hotcakes. And then when she
awesome.
mailed the products to people, because we had her send them directly, I passed the shipping cost to her. She like sent them these amazing bonuses and sample kits and everything, and everyone was so incredibly thrilled and happy.
That's so awesome, and I love that idea because you're promoting another local, business or independent business through your campaign, and these are probably people that would have never found out about her if it wasn't for what you did. So
Mhm.
you gave this person an opportunity to get a new audience as well.
100%. Someone cruised by and bought like $1,000 of her products from
Wow.
from seeing a post about it from me.
So
So
so those 20 products you donated was paid
got
for and
paid
then
for.
some.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally. And it's great. She sent them so many samples of her products with the product, so they all wanted to buy more. I'm sure they will. She probably got 20 new customers.
that's awesome. There's so many awesome takeaways from this whole conversation, and I hope people have learned a lot from this, and just think creative, like think outside the box, think of how you can partner with others, and figure out what is the platform that is most authentic and native to you. Do some work on figuring out what your brand is and make it personal, make it real to you. I mean, so many amazing lessons. So I hope people learned a lot from this. I want to ask you a couple of fun, quick, like rapid fire questions. But what was the first concert you ever been to, or first memorable
Ani,
concert?
the very first concert I attended was Ani DeFranco.
Ah, awesome. Where was that at?
It was in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, at some hotel conference room.
Okay, that's cool. I've seen her twice. She's great, really, really talented. What is the first album you ever bought?
Okay, so I'm not 100% sure. There's a couple of possibilities. It might have been like Hot Sounds, like 1987 or something like that. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Mm-mm. No.
There were these like compilation. I think it was like an LP, like a record, and it was a compilation of all the hot tracks of like 1987. But it also might have been a Bon Jovi cassette.
Nice.
So it's it's one or the other.
One of my first was a Bon Jovi album as well. For sure.
Perfect.
What is the best advice you've ever gotten?
To live in alignment with my yes and my no, to kind of
Mm,
have that be my guiding compass and guiding light.
I like that. What is something that you're currently into or interested in that just maybe it could be a guilty pleasure or a new hobby and doesn't have to be music related? Like, for example, mine right now is I really love the show Ted Lasso. And a lot of people are talking about that show, but I'm obsessed because it's something different from what's on TV. It's like something positive and lighthearted, and I feel like there's nothing else like that. So that's kind of my obsession right now. Like, what is something that you're currently really into?
I'm obsessed with hot springs.
Hot
Like
springs?
getting my body in as many hot springs as I can find. I live in California, so it's there's more accessible here, but I love to just travel to places with hot springs and get in them and like nerd out on the mineral content, and that's one of my obsessions.
I need to do more of that. Have you been to Florida?
Okay, I haven't been to all those beautiful springs in Florida, but it's on my list now because I just heard of them for the first time.
There's so many, and they're amazing. There's one I haven't been to, but it looks amazing. So if you remember, Google search Devil's Den in Florida.
Mm.
It's the spring that's like inside this cave, but the cave has like an opening that the light comes in, and pictures just look gorgeous. Like it looks like such a cool place.
I need to check that out.
Yes, it's a cool spot. What is the, you don't have to name all three, but what is the books, podcasts, or documentaries that you share the most or recommend the most to people?
Okay, so it's actually books. I don't think I share any podcasts or documentaries, weirdly enough.
Okay.
But I have a few books that like are always on the list. So one is Healing Back Pain by Dr. John Sarno. So most of us have chronic pain that's actually psychosomatic, and this book is the most genius thing I've ever read, and it healed me of like a life of intense pain that I don't have any pain anymore. It's an absolute miracle.
That's awesome.
Best like $7 you'll ever spend, in my opinion. It's
awesome.
a very boring book, but if you read the whole thing, you'll be pain-free. The other one is Attached by Amir Levine and Rachel Heller. It's all about the science of adult attachment theory, and I think this should be required reading for anyone that ever plans to have a relationship ever. Romantic relationship. So everyone. And then I recommend The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer.
That's good.
You're nodding. You know what I'm talking about, which is the most incredible book about how the mind works and how we can let go of our traumas and live with the voice in our head in a harmonious way.
I love it. I think I listened to it on Audible a couple times already.
Yeah, cool. I have to listen to it over and over again because it doesn't, it takes time to really sink in.
Process, yeah, for sure. Awesome. So before I ask you the last question, I ask everyone, how can people get in touch with you? Like, what's the best way people can find out what you do and connect with you?
Yeah, if you go to my website, taradivina.com, or you can find me on Instagram at taradivina, or on Facebook, Tara Divina. I kind of have the same handle. It's ubiquitous. I think there's only two people with my name. And the other one is clearly very different than me. You can find me there. Feel free to send me a message. Say hello. I'm reachable. I'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. And the question I ask everyone at the end is, what is your definition of making it?
My definition of making it is being creatively fulfilled and creating beauty that I'm truly proud of and getting to spend most of my life doing that.
Live the life you love.